Hello and welcome. You are watching the FutureScape virtual seminar. This one we will be talking about architects working with landscape designers. I am Mark Latchford, so I am the lead garden designer at HollandGreen. I'm joined with Ben Holland, who is one of the partners and founders of HollandGreen. I suppose what we're going to talk about today is sort of the integration between landscape design and architecture, how that works, some of the pitfalls that we've fallen in before, and just take you through some of the finished gardens that we've done and some processes as well that we kind of follow through. So obviously we're, in terms of a little bit of history, myself, I have been a garden designer for 10 years. I joined HollandGreen a year and a half ago, having worked with lots of architectural firms all over London and the home counties. One of the things that we thought was a really great idea in terms of us teaming up was that coherent design language flowing through from the architecture outside into the garden space. So not only in terms of processes, but the end result for the client as well. So yeah. What we'll do, we'll run you through some slides. Ben will take the first one just to give you a little bit of history about HollandGreen and how we got together and how this works.
Yes, so to give you an idea, we started off as an architectural design company 10 years ago, focusing purely on residential architecture, one-off individual private homes. In the 10 years, we've grown from doing sort of small loft conversions and side return extensions through to much larger schemes. Our typical projects are bespoke single homes or renovation and heritage projects on sort of listed and conservation type homes. So quite ranging, but all very exciting. About 4 years ago, we decided, because of frustrations of working with external consultants, that it would make sense to bring in an interior designer to work with our architectural team, which we did, and that went very well. So flash forward 3 years, we have 4 interior designers, and then 2 years ago, we realized that to complete the loop, we should also think about bringing landscaping in-house as another service. Since doing that, we now have also built a landscape design team up of 4, and we now have almost every single project with landscape and architecture working hand in hand as a united team, and it has revolutionized the way we work. And it's a great benefit to us as a design team to be working together and having a very joined up collaborative process from the very outset, but also is proving hugely successful and beneficial to the clients who really appreciate that way of working also. Do you want to jump to the next slide, Mark?
This is just a quick summary in terms of our core values. So just touching on a little bit what Ben said there, but basically what makes us tick, what makes us unique, and not just us in terms of HollandGreen, but this kind of goes hand in hand with the processes of that collaboration between architects and landscape designers. Ben, do you want to just run us through?
Yeah, so we spent quite a lot of time thinking about our core values and what made us unique, despite being, I think, fairly unique in the fact that we do cover all the 3 disciplines in-house as opposed to just focusing on the one. We as a company try and be innovative in everything we do, always think of fresh new ways of working, not accepting the status quo. Hence, bringing the disciplines under one roof and doing that. Being attentive and listening to the clients and listening to each other is hugely important. So it's very much a listening situation as opposed to us dictating, which we've often found can be the norm. We try and be insightful and come up with different and fresh solutions for everything. But the most important one for me is the collaborative element. And that means collaboration between HollandGreen as a company and the clients externally to the company. But almost as important, if not more importantly, is the internal collaborations. That's architect, landscape designer, or indeed interior designer, all working together, collaborating as a united design team from the outset, working the same software, the same client brief, having met the client on the very first meeting, through to the end delivery, turning up with the client's gift 2 years down the line. That collaboration is what makes what we offer, I believe, so unique and such a and is proving so successful?
So one of the things we just wanted to run you through was sort of from the start. So that's kind of understanding the design, obviously between the architecture and externally with the gardens as well. So one example we kind of thought of was this large property. You can see in the bottom image, there's actually contrasting styles with the house. You've got a very traditional sort of Victorian style, Georgian style house. That was the original element of the house, which was going to be renovated. The client had asked for quite a modern, quite sleek contemporary extension onto the back. Both actually married quite well. This is quite a large property, so there's lots more going on. But one of the things that we can kind of see when I joined, this project came up, was that integration between the new extension and rolling out into the gardens. So one of the things that we kind of thought of was how do you physically get from A to B? So you can see in the bottom image, you can see again very, very sleek contemporary sort of glass box with lovely rolling lawns which go all the way around the back of the house. What we wanted to do was kind of touch on the flavour of that contemporary side, which is on the back. So we designed a set of sort of floating steps which lead you down from this from the glass box, which is then living room and kitchen, down into the garden. So this is actually a really beautiful, quite large property. Lots of lovely rolling gardens, woodland, tennis courts, tree house. But yeah, we are getting that balance between the traditional style of the existing house and this sort of new element that's onto the back. What we did to marry those two together was take again some of the style of the contemporary side, rolling outside. So you can see the floating steps is a really cool element and quite a centerpiece. So actually, there's not much else happening at the back of the house just here, with these steps being quite a focal point. Again, at night they kind of lit up, really come to life. But I suppose trying to get from that point, some of the things that you need to do, or some of the things we found you need to do was one, understand the requirements of the site. So that goes obviously with the client as well as the garden, the surrounding landscape as well. The lifestyle of the client. Again, this is very important. You know, are they going to be eating outside at all? Do they have kids? How much time do they actually spend outside? With our aim being the landscape designers is to try and get them outside as much as possible. The site restraints. So again, you know, you really need to know what it is that you're working with from the off. So, you know, a really good site analysis of the site is a brilliant idea. You need to understand, you know, sort of drainage requirements, if there's any TPOs. Do you need access? Access is very important. You know, how are you going, if the house is already built, how are you going to get into the back and finish off some of the garden stuff? And also understanding the overall vision of the garden as well. Again, making sure that marries nicely with the styling of the house. So with that said, some of the pitfalls that I have fallen into previously, and I know Ben has when working with garden designers, is kind of a set of things. And what we've drawn out here is, just to start with, is drawings. Now, what can often happen is if you've got kind of two sets of people working not in tangent, but kind of doing their own thing. Sometimes drawings are updated from one side and not the other side. So making sure that everything is integrated is really key, because there's nothing worse than working off an old set of drawings and finding out a lot later when you've already presented to the client. The other thing is making sure that information is passed on. So that goes hand in hand with communication as well. So everything needs to be passed on, every last little sort of detail, just to make sure that, you know, when you come to the build, that there's no nasty surprises. Timing, again, that kind of goes hand in hand with information, but making sure that you've got your timings in terms of logistics correct. So not only should the drawing be, and in terms of access, making sure you can get around to the side of the house, there's scaffolding up, making sure that you know, deliveries are coordinated well, making sure there's space on the site. You know, we're lucky on this one, it's quite large. Some places, particularly in sort of central London, space is a premium. So making sure that you have all your timings you know, in sequence is really important. There's one thing we touched on as well already, was access. So again, particularly with sort of sites that are in urban or suburban areas, getting into the garden can sometimes be difficult if, you know, access from either side, and sometimes, you know, you've got sort of corridors to the side of the house. If one of those is shut off for whatever reason, or they're scaffolding them up, then you need to think outside the box. You know, can you get in the garden through a fence around the back? All sorts of things. But again, that goes hand in hand with the timing. If you have the sequencing correct, and access into the site is should follow straight after. And the other, which is probably the big thing, is budget. So it's one thing when I used to work with other architects, budget was rarely spoken about. We do here at HollandGreen is from the off, we speak to clients and we will ask to have some kind of budget in mind. And that's just to make sure, you know, we're designing within their expectations. And, you know, we're all here to make sure that we're not just designing nice houses and gardens, but they actually get built. So understanding, you know, the budget and what proportion of that goes towards the house, towards the garden, towards interiors is really, really key.
I think, as you just said, the key thing for me is the software. For example, we work in the same software. The design teams all use the same software. We work in a three-dimensional BIM environment. So the house is designed in context with the grounds and the interiors. So the survey comes back, and at the very outset of the project, we're building it all together. So the drawings are being aligned, so you don't have outdated drawings coming through, because if somebody, the architectural team, updates the drawings, it will automatically be updated for the landscaping team, so everyone's seeing it in real time, again, working together, collaborating on the same model, the same drawings. So the information problem is solved. Timing-wise, that very first meeting with the client after I've won the project involves in landscape design and architecture. So the timings are there from day, they're involved in day dots, not as it used to be in the pre-having landscaping in-house. Often we go all the way down the line, design it up, and then call landscaping in, and realize that we're coming from very different angles, and lots of challenges and changes being made at that point after the event, which is a challenge in itself. So now we have involvement from both divisions of the front end, regular weekly meetings throughout, even if that weekly meeting is 10 minutes long, just to say, not a lot's changed this week, let's catch up next week. Hugely valuable. Means that the architecture team don't forget about the important things like access, as Mark said, and that you know, the little things that are easily missed that become huge problems later just don't happen anymore. And then the budget, again, just as Mark said, is giving the client the clarity in the day, right at the front end when we're doing the feasibility sketches. This is how much you need to think about for your house. This is how much you need to think about for your garden. Let's have the difficult discussions at the very outset before we embark on this design journey, and then find out down the line that we can't afford a piece of this. And invariably experience has shown that it's usually the landscape that gets cut. So what we do now is have those discussions at day dot, I keep saying, and then we will allocate a budget accordingly and go, okay, fine, we're happy with that. We don't have quite this much. Okay, right. Well, in which case then let's scale back here, let's scale back there, and let's agree to move forward on something that is realistic. So that is a hugely important element for us, getting that budget right at the beginning of the project, not at the end.
Exactly. You're just touching on again on the budget. So if there's any other garden designers listening that have worked with architects, you've all felt the pain of doing lots of lovely drawings, and then the budget gets cut for the garden. Which, you know, has to happen, that's fine. But I suppose what's key, if that does happen and you have been lucky enough to be involved early on, is to make sure you have provisions, you've future-proofed the garden. So you go in terms of the house design as well, just making sure that you can still get machinery into the back, making sure, you know, in terms of deliveries, that the trees can come in, you know, materials. So yeah, if unfortunately the gardens do get cut, which does happen, at least for the client's sake, you've future-proofed everything, and you've thought very, you know, 1 or 2, maybe 3 years ahead, make sure those things can still be achieved in the future. Just as an example, one of the pitfalls is this is something that's I've seen many times, not at HollandGreen, because we now sort these things out very early on. Little things, little details like this manhole cover you can see. Again, this has happened to me far too many times, I care to remember, where the manhole cover, you'd think it was a very simple thing about having that perpendicular with the house, just making sure everything's lined up. Often it's not. When groundworks come in, this kind of just get it in, let's get it done quickly, and these little details aren't thought out. So what we do now here at HollandGreen is all of these last little things are thought out. So when the package is sent to a landscaper or a main contractor, all these touches, all these finishing touches will make all the difference, are then sorted out before the issue even comes up. Moving on to the next slide. So this is in terms of just some of the stuff that Ben's already touched on, but making it coherent. So this is all about, the team overall working together. And again, early on, this is one of the key things that we found, is making sure that all of this is thought through very, very early on. But, dividing up responsibilities. And again, touching on something that Ben said, is regular meetings. And we do this on all the projects we do. Again, like you said, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, just to say not much has changed, but keeping up that communication is key. It's very easy for things to fall through the gap and to not get passed on, or just to make assumptions. So having regular meetings are a great way of getting out of future issues. And all of that goes hand in hand with communication. So it's something that's said a lot, and it's something that's missed quite often as well. So in terms of having a set regular meeting every Monday, every Tuesday at a certain time, have the meeting, and everything is kind of thought out all the way through from start to completion. And then on crossovers. So again, this is in terms of the physical garden, physical house. There are a lot of crossovers in terms of responsibilities. Particularly when you're on site. Is it the main contractor's responsibility to undertake the drainage, which obviously comes to the house, then goes into the garden. On the previous slide, you'll see something that wasn't thought out right at the beginning. So then manhole covers are kind of in the wrong place. So making sure that all avenues are covered and that all crossovers are well thought out. A lot of the time it's just working with nice people who are understanding and jolly. That always helps quite a lot. But yeah, making sure that crossovers and responsibilities are thought out. It's not so much batting away something to someone else. It's making sure if anything is if you can see an issue, raise it early on. Ultimately, at HollandGreen, we're all in the same team. But if you're working with external people, you're still under. The client will still see you as under the same bubble. So it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that everything is coherent. And then rolling into the design. So we're going to show you a couple of designs that we're currently working on, and how the integration with a landscape team now being part of the HollandGreen umbrella, how that's improved the process, how that's improved the output. So in this instance, this was actually quite a small house renovation, but quite a large garden project, which is normally the other way around. So it was refreshing in terms of the proportion of the intervention. Actually, this was quite landscape heavy, which is great for us. So on this particular project, and it was about a 1930s style house, not particularly attractive, but the client had quite big ambitions for the garden. They wanted it to be sort of a great entertaining space. So as part of that, we designed a retractable pergola with a hot tub with a sliding deck. So it's all quite James Bond, and sort of different chill out areas. So they like to entertain. They like entertain quite large groups. There's lots of different areas with the garden. There's an outdoor kitchen, a pergola which you can sit under. There's the hot tub, a fire pit to one side. And when you travel down the garden, there's a sort of a really pretty woodland at the end, kept very natural, and it's all about just trying to increase the biodiversity of the specific site that's here. And up the top end outside the house is a lot more sort of squish, and definitely about sort of entertaining and impressing people. Do you want to add on anything on this one, Ben?
Garden being the main event here, and increases the company sort of grown and developed. Instead of having a landscape design team, which is a bolt-on service to the architectural team, we now have a landscape design company within our group of companies that stands shoulder to shoulder with architecture, and can run and lead on projects like this, where in fact 80% of the budget, if not more, is landscaping led. So the landscape is the lead, and the architectural side sort of follows through. And design of the house was very much led by what happens outside in the external spaces. So as Mark said, it's quite interesting to see that sort of power shift for us internally as the landscaping became the main player. And this is not the only case of this happening at HG. It's increasingly becoming the case that we are seeing big landscaping projects with architectural support, as opposed to the other way around.
And you can see why that's happened. Obviously, we're in quite a good flow now in terms of the process of the crossover with architecture and landscape. And, you know, thankfully it's coming across to clients as well. It's a huge benefit. It goes to all the points that we said before about, you know, the responsibilities, you know, being, you know, working as part of a team, whether it's internal or external people. But, you know, the client kind of sees everyone under one roof, whether, you know, we happen to be, but, you know, even if it's external people, they see everyone as under one roof. So, you know, if one person drops a ball, everyone kind of drops a ball. And again, it goes hand in hand. So this has worked really, really well because we've been having regular meetings, because everyone understands the crossover, because everything has been thought out, you know, to the very last detail, internally and externally. So we started this build about 2 months ago, and it'll be rolling out until the sort of the beginning part of next year. So, you know, hopefully watch this space. You'll see some new photos of these, yeah, sort of February, March time. We then just wanted to share with you some sort of full landscaping projects that we've done that have been completed. This being sort of one of the first. So this was and I'll let Ben talk about the house, and then I can give you a quick run through the gardens.
Yeah, this is a house which in Buckinghamshire, which was very, very large and had lovely plots, but was actually quite dark and didn't make the most of the amazing views the house could have, or the plot had. I remember very clearly the first day I went in, meeting the client and going through the front door and just being faced with the wall, and him saying that what he wanted to have ultimately is be able to come through the front door and have it open and light and bright and be able to see down the garden and make the most of the amazing view across the Chilterns that he's got there. So that's what we did. And I think it's a similar brief for the garden to have an outside that, again, made more of the outside space and the views across the valley. So you see the image there on the left, that is the finished article where we now come through the front door, big doors at the back, the big double ridge extension you saw there, as well as the sort of the glazed oak framed extension on the side, entertaining space. And now we have that view. You come in, you have the light, the bright, it's one big space as opposed to dark corridors, and you can see all the way through and out.
Just going back in terms of this property on a landscaping perspective. So again, as Ben said, all about the views. Everything was about the views. Absolutely stunning sort of panorama view of the Chiltern Hills. But with that, obviously, so this property was up on a hill, so we did have some dramatic level changes. And one of the things to combat that was to have a series of retaining walls, which took you down sort of a flat lawn onto a secondary space, some seating areas, and then you had the swimming pool, which you saw in the previous slide. So that was combating thing number one. But to then tie this in with the style of internally and externally of the building, what we wanted to do is match some of the materials as best as possible. So you can see in this larger image, we have sort of a timber sleeper retaining wall, which then tied in very nicely with the sort of timber uprights of this extension. And the core 10 steel, which we have in the steps in this fire pit. And what we wanted to do was sort of marry the sort of the earthy tones of the brick of the house. And as you can see just above, again, in terms of views, I really liked the image on the right-hand side, which was, again, it's just about framing things. So just putting things in places to make sure that there's actually something to look at. And in this instance, this is a small corridor, and we had the sort of swing chair position just right, just so you can get a little glimpse of that. And you see the bottom image with the swimming pool. So, you know, not only does this look great at daytime, it really comes to life at nighttime. So again, in terms of the crossover, we had an external lighting designer who designed all this internally and externally. All the controls was kind of set within the house. You know, everything, you know, is on a phone or on a remote control. But yeah, looking great at nighttime.
You can see the oak, the timber frame structure with the glazing on two sides, so we could really take in the sides and orientate your view across and down Mark's amazing garden to really, again, give that space, that open, light, bright space the clients want with the views across the garden. And really, yeah, you can't see there, but it sweeps way down the valley, and it's a lovely space now.
Onto another one. So this one we finished this summer. Very different sort of take on the first property. So this is a very sort of traditional English cottage. So it's all about, internally, sort of that cozy feel. Lots of sort of rustic features, some little lovely trinkets placed within the house and the garden. And in terms of sort of that integration on this particular project, so I was involved in this one just as the house was being renovated. So I was in a tad late than what we'd normally be involved in just now, but everything was quite smooth. Again, we had lots of really happy, really friendly people in terms of the main contractor and the landscaper, and that makes all the difference. But what we wanted to do with this one, you see it's a really, really beautiful property, was really, really sort of create a bit of a wow factor in terms of the planting to really add to that cottage vibe. So this property, the clients are here more often in the summer, hence a lot of the summer planting, and then Christmas time. So I think they're just about to come back, to spend a couple of weeks for Christmas. Lots was involved in terms of this project. So you can see, obviously, you've got a really nice renovation of the house. There was quite a sleek swimming pool, again, taking in some really beautiful views over the surrounding fields. What was nice is there was 2 llamas in the field beyond, which would often come and say hello whilst building the garden. Very friendly. On to the next slide. So this one, what we really want to show again was that connection between the inside space and the outside space. So the image on the left is one of the living rooms. You see some lovely bottles of champagne. So the clients like to entertain, not only for family, but for friends, when friends are allowed around this weird time that we're in. And marrying materials. So again, you can see the stone inside. We've matched to create a pavilion outside. This was an oak framed pavilion, which was built just after the renovation was finished on the main house, because we had to get planning permission of it, so it just takes a little bit of time. What we wanted to do was create another entertaining space outside, which really had that sort of warm, cozy feel. So you can see you've got it's all year round cover, a really nice sort of sweet wood burning stove into one corner, really cool lanterns, and lots of lovely furniture. Again, it's a little take in terms of sort of an interior styling brought outside. And again, just sort of adding on to the connection between inside and outside. So obviously the stone has then been repeated inside for a modern take to create this sort of feature wall in one of the main bathrooms, and was also used for the pavilion, some stone walls around the swimming pool. So we really wanted to get that connectivity between inside and outside. And then going on the style of the property, it being sort of an old rustic cottage, we added lots of little trinkets with the clients. So, the cart onto one side, which is now a little herb garden in itself. So that's with lots of pots, lots of lovely herbs. And again, making sort of a really warm and cozy feel inside the pavilion. Those plums actually from the garden, again, which is really, really nice. And it's nice to see that not only is the garden being used, but the garden's really loved. And again, just adding in terms of, understanding the client, understanding their style and understanding their brief, was all about these little trinkets. So, on the left-hand side, they actually found this really pretty, we're calling the fairy house, which now has a light inside, which is really cool at night time. Again, it's just that little bit of sort of that whimsical feel and a little bit of magic. A really sweet swing in the center image. So again, this is on an existing tree. And, they have 2 small children. So they really wanted not only entertaining for adults, but, we really thought carefully about how we'd get the kids out into the garden and how, what they'd like and what they'd enjoy. And then a little image on the left, again, you can just see in terms of these really sweet little additions. So this was something they found, a little wooden fire truck, which again has been planted inside. And you can just see the views beyond that, which are amazing, really, really stunning property. And then just going on to the next project. So again, this was a really well thought out. This one was our first one, which we started from scratch. HollandGreen did the interiors, the architecture and the landscape. And because of that, we really got to capture sort of the client's taste internally and externally. So this was sort of a Japanese inspired house and garden. So you can see the bonsai on the left-hand side, which is in the front garden. Use of materials and space internally. So you can see that the roof in the middle image. So this timber roof forms part of the kitchen and the dining room, but actually you can just see that extends outside as well. So this was well thought out with the architect, so getting that connection between inside and outside. And again, matching materials. You can see the bench on the right hand side. So, you know, clearly we're trying to match the timber roof and making sure that everything is well thought out and integrated. This was one of the main images. So you can see we're in the kitchen and dining room with this lots of lovely open glazing to get lots of that green space coming inside. So the client loves to have the door open. She, you know, unless it's really chucking it down, she rarely closes it. So it's really, really nice to see, you know, not only that her and her family are enjoying it, but, you know, that it's getting really good use. And, you know, you can see that connection between inside and outside. It's little things, but, you know, there's some house plants which were brought in just to get that little bit of green, a little extra splash of green inside as well.
It's a great project, a great client, and it's good having a very clear brief from the outset that we're going for the Japanese sort of field design, and that was clear to landscape and architecture team from the outset. And as such, there's a lot of consultation between the two about where various things might be planted, and as such, you know, what would the views be, as such, where would the glazing be positioned, what materials we'll be using outside of the garden, so we can think about the floors inside and outside, the flow and the continuity, and it was all very joined up from the outset, which again just made our lives easier. But as end result was better, it was slicker, smoother for the client. Yeah, it was a lovely project.
So we just on that, we matched lots of materials inside. So there was a porcelain floor inside the dining room and kitchen, which we've matched outside. There's a really cool stepping stone detail, which is on the next slide, which we, you know, just to add to that modern take, sort of Japanese oriental garden. On this one as well, similarly on the first project that we showed you in terms of key views, you can see the sculpture on the right hand side. So the second the front door swings open, you've got this really cool view straight down the garden. So straight through this dining, in fact, you can see on this side, straight through the dining table, then lines up with the sculpture outside. So again, making sure all these crossovers, so, you know, every window that you look out of, there's something new to look onto. And again, just sort of wanting to touch on the styling and this sort of this influence of this sort of Japanese style house and garden. In the sort of middle image where you can see the Asa, again, you can just see the overhang of the roof. So this is really, really cool. So not only does, you know, this same style roof inside and outside, you've also got skylight inside and outside as well. So you're getting lots of lovely light inside, getting all that green sort of space flowing inside the kitchen. And little details like there's a rain chain and a planter on the left-hand side. This was a detail that we thought about in terms of obviously a downpipe with the rain, off the roof and into the guttering. We then added the chain and a large pot underneath just to get, you know, that extra little bit of detail. There's kind of building virtue out of necessity, which was really, really cool. The client really, really loves it. And actually it's a really nice feature, a very simple idea, but a really nice feature for the garden. And that's a great idea, a great sort of example of where the crossover comes in. So just looking at the details of, you know, the house and the garden, and if there's anything that can be linked in a really cool and imaginative way, then, you know, that's definitely something that should be explored. And in the top image as well, you can see, so this is the living room looking out onto the front garden. So you can see the bonsai tree there. So again, all about key views. So it was actually, you could see quite a lot of the house on the other side of the road wasn't particularly pretty. So making sure there's lots of lovely planting underneath the window to focus on. And again, it's getting those splashes of colour, a little bit of movement as you're sitting inside. And in terms of the flow, so you can see the stepping stone effect on the main image on the right-hand side. We have that going through the lawn in the front garden. And we wanted to repeat that, but in a slightly different way in the rear garden. So you can see as you come out of the sliding doors, you then have stepping stones set into pebble. And then that takes you to a really cool pod seat right at the end. You know, this garden comes to life at night time. So there's really, really great lighting design in this, internally and externally. And again, making the most out of the main features of the garden. This wasn't a particularly large garden, particularly in the back. It's kind of sort of longer and thinner, which kind of meant that you're looking at everything. You know, nothing can hide. Everything's kind of on show. So if you're going to do that, you know, you might as well make the best of it. So, you know, that pod chair, obviously, is really nice to sit under, but at night time with the festoon lights, really, really comes to life. And that is us. So what we'll do, we'll stop recording just now, and then Ben and I will be available for any questions straight after this. So thank you for listening. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you took something out of this. And yeah, feel free to ask your questions. Speak to you soon. just in case anyone's listening, so just here for the live chat now. So feel free to ask questions. In the meantime, I will also answer some of the questions still on the video link. Thank you very much, Tim. You promised lots of questions.
Hello.
Hello, Tim.
Yeah, sorry, chat, it says chat is disabled.
Oh.
When I joined this, it said chat was disabled.
You can ask the questions through the PITFALLS chat.
Oh, through the other chat. Yeah, so I think the answer, so I think what's happened is most people have already asked the questions through the previous chat, and you've kind of answered them by typing them out, but it might just be worthwhile running your eye back over those questions and then just picking a few out just to sort of talk about them now, if you like. So there's not much interaction in this session apart from type stuff in the chat box, but the argument is you're answering the questions that people have asked by typing in the previous thing.
Brilliant. Thank you. You've clearly done this before, Tim.
I have, yeah. It's not my first rodeo. No, you're right. I'll sit myself on mute now, but somebody somewhere needs to disable the chat in this window, otherwise people will get confused and think they can ask. Because the other argument is people can ask supplementary questions in this session then. So people have stopped watching the video. There's a few people I think are still watching the video at the moment. And because it depends on when you've started watching the video as to when it finishes. And then I think people can then ask further questions through the chat here. But at the minute, this chat on this Zoom session is actually disabled. So I can't type anything in that lower right-hand box with the chat.
So, Gabby, do you know how to
enable chat?
Enable, yeah.
Yes, I can do that for you.
Thank you. Cheers, Tim.
Okay.
There you go.
So Polly-Ann's just asked a question, so I'm not sure if some people are watching this or on the live on the chat that was on the video. So I'll answer the question verbally here, and then I'll write into the box as well, just in case if some are watching this or still on the video. So Polly asks, what advice would you have for working with an architect in terms of how you hand over from the build of the house to the garden? How do you delineate where one ends and the other begins? It's a really good question, and actually that line should probably be sort of sorted out, asked quite early on. I think one of the leading things that's come out of my experience of working with the architects is getting everything in as early on as possible and asking that question, where do you start and where do we begin? Some things often cross over with sort of lighting or M&E, the mechanical and engineering. The architecture and the garden design might be quite separate, but then things like that do cross over. So it's just making sure that communication's up, that you have all the details that you need. So it's asking the questions, don't leave any stone unturned. If you think that there's something that might have been missed, it's just better off just asking quite early on. Herman's just asked, would you suggest a preferred landscape contractor to the client, or does the contract go with main contractors? It depends on the project. More often than not, on the larger projects, they will go out to tender and then be under the main contractor, which is, I think, a really, really good thing. There's lots of information that's passed over. On other projects, it will go direct to a landscaper. I've worked with quite a few landscapers over the years, and some you build up really, really good relationships with. So it will be some of those that I'd tend to put forward direct. But again, if it's a larger contract where, you know, it's like, you know, a brand new build and there's lots of crossover and the client would prefer that it goes out to tender, then that's the route that we take. And again, you know, if there's scope to put some landscapers forward, then we will. But I suppose if it is out of our control as to who's chosen, we just make sure that we review the tender documents, go through any questions. And again, I suppose the main thing is about building relationships between yourselves and the contractor. It's always good to, you know, you want to have, it needs to be enjoyable and a fun and easy process. And ultimately, you know, have a laugh along the way. These builds can be quite a long time, so making sure you get on with them and everyone understand each other is key. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Mark. Sorry, I realised I've been on a different you're on the live stream. I was on a separate one, so I got myself a bit confused.
Same. So what I'm doing, so Tim's here. Tim's a photographer, works, does all sorts of gardens, photography for show gardens. He just gives us a good tip about read the questions in the chat with the video. And I think we're going to answer them verbally here because I'm slightly confused about who's watching and who's still watching the video. So I was going to answer them here verbally and then write the messages in the box as well, just in case.
Good plan. I've been sort of writing some of them as we've been going through as well on the separate stream. I didn't realise that the Zoom link was live. So.
No, yeah, I assumed you didn't join, so I just started doing the spiel.
Well,
for about 20 minutes. I'm just going to pop over again and see for any new questions. Rachel's saying she can't hear, please help. I assume the mute button would be the answer.
I can see Gabby and Tim. That's it.
Yes, I'll help her out.
Thank you. Do you want to just, whilst instead of sitting there, should we just go, Ben, should we go through the questions from the top?
Okay, which ones have you sort of covered? Have you gone through?
Only some of the bottom ones. So one of the first ones from Tim was on about lifestyle. Yeah,
and I mentioned that in the link, but as I say, very much we have sort of standard briefing questions which cover both the architectural and landscape design side of things, where we will probe the client and make sure they are thinking about the future as opposed to just what they need today. Simple things like, are you going to get a dog? You know, what are your kids' futures? I think someone mentioned people getting elderly and infirm, and you know, big sloping gardens. Should you introduce terracing and so forth? You know, again, this stuff, because we've seen it 1,000 times, comes to us and maybe wouldn't have occurred to the client. So, yeah, in short, definitely we should probe and ask these questions to get them thinking about things that maybe they wouldn't have, and that is part of the standard process. And yeah, it's good to tease that out very much at the front end.
So one of the things that I always come back to is asking these things really early on. Like the earlier these things are raised, the better setup it is as you go through the designs and then through, you know, to the build. So just, you know, getting there as early on as possible is really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on to the next question. So one was by Karen. You mentioned keeping communication up to date with changes and so on. With an increase in working remotely, what measures have you introduced to keep track of everything?
Which again, I sort of mentioned, and I typed further down, but easier to talk through. We use a number of sort of soft pieces of software. As I said in my in the typing, we've removed one big link in the chain by having the architectural team and the landscape design team working together. We're already in the same office. We're already using the same software. We can look each other in the eye and ask those questions in real time, as opposed to having to email stuff over, transfer, you know, AutoCAD into ArchiCAD into Revit or whatever it may be, and all the different sort of elements and challenges that brings. So that's a big plus for us. We also use Zoom for every project. We set up a separate Zoom channel so that we have all the team, interior design, architecture and landscaping, have a common communication thread for just the day-to-day chatter, which is very helpful. And we also use a CRM system called CMAP, which tracks all the finances, all the more sort of formal emails and communications and costings and everything else, which is the sort of the backbone of it all. And then on top of that, we have Mail Manager, which is an email tracking and management system to link all client communications, our communication suppliers, everything together, to ensure that everything is searchable, findable, tracked and recorded. And if you need to find out something, you can very easily go back and find, with a few keywords, an email that was sent 18 months ago, without having to just do the classic trawl through every single historic email trying to find the little nugget of information. So yeah, Mail Manager is a very good tool if you want to look into that.
I think Zoom's been the key. I mean, we actually were using Zoom pre-COVID, obviously not as much, but with some clients quite far away, it just made sense to do the virtual meetings. Obviously now, we're constantly on it. And as Ben says, we set up individual chats per project. So you're not just sending one message to the whole team, it's just the specific people that need to hear it. And that helps kind of tracking. So again, what can be quite confusing is just emails that are lost in the ether, where you're just bombarded with too many. So having these individual projects are actually really, really good. Make sure that things aren't lost.
We've also implemented a weekly team meeting, just a very informal team meeting, which includes landscape, interior design, ourselves, any other externals who may be relevant for that week. Just have a quick catch up. Even if it's just to say, hi guys, not a lot's happened this week, everything's still in planning and not a huge amount has changed. And then go, okay, great, we'll see you again next week. But it just means there's that constant communication, even a small little update, or architect might come in, oh, by the way, we've changed the drainage detail outside the sliding doors. It might be a little throwaway thing for architecture, but actually that can have a big implication knock on to the landscaping, exterior, the paving, and sort of what's happening externally, which would have been missed and hadn't picked up on if we hadn't had that little catch up. What's new, what's changed in the last week, however big or small. And sometimes the meeting can go on for an hour, other times it can be a quick 5 minutes and off we go. But getting into that regular discipline to have that discussion is well worth doing.
One comment from Juliet was just about the crossover. So it's also really important to be clear on the areas of responsibility. Examples, thresholds and swimming pools, to ensure the client also knows. So client not instructing architect about garden elements and landscaper about architectural elements. Again, that goes just hand in hand with keeping up the communication, just making sure that crossover is key, and that all areas are covered. I mean, it keeps, in my mind, keeps just constant communication. As Ben said, it doesn't have to be, great big long meetings, just, sort of 5-10 minute meeting every day, even if to say, look, not much has happened. But that keeping those things up to date, we found really important. Makes the process a lot smoother, and make sure, things aren't missed. Tanya asked about, you say you use the same software, which one? So I answered this within the chat. Ben's popped off. So we use a software called ArchiCAD, which is very much geared up for architects. It's quite a powerful tool. You can go in quite a lot of detail. It's quite in depth. It's still really, really great for garden design. So this is a new software that I hadn't heard of before prior to joining HollandGreen. But like I said, actually making sure, one of the key things is making sure that whatever software you and the architect are working on, that they communicate with each other, they can export into each other. And there's lots of times there's been crossover where one bit of software, like from SketchUp, won't export into Revit or whatever it is. And then things are lost and you're having to redraw things constantly, which can be quite a pain and obviously very, very time consuming. So I suppose with any architects that you're working with, just, ask, what software are you working on, and have a look, invest. And it doesn't mean that you have to learn a brand new software. It's just making sure you can find a way that the two can export into each other very, very clearly. It's very easy to lose information sometimes on those bits. Tim in this chat was just asking, what happens if you discover something unexpected when doing the landscaping, e.g. Hidden hard landscaping or hidden features that then need action afterwards? There's a lot of, in that case, there's a lot of thinking on your feet. So making sure that you're flexible and that the designs to some degree are flexible. And this, this does happen often, that this unexpected things on site that comes up. So just making sure, that everyone is flexible and can think slightly outside of the box, but also making sure that the client is kept up to date with that. Hopefully you'd ask when the initial surveys are done that, as much information is gathered as possible. When you go to the site, we do quite an in-depth site analysis. So I'd be there for probably a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours, take as many measurements, as many sketches or notes as possible. One thing I've been doing a lot more recently is taking videos instead of photos. And that's been a bit of a revolution with us and the design team. So it means whilst I'm walking around, I'm taking a video, probably just 2 or 3 minutes, even if it's just sections. So I might have 3 videos for one site. It could be 1, it could be 10, but short videos. It's just basically a live sort of discussion about the garden. So I physically point, I'm narrating as I go through to make sure that I haven't missed anything, but the information then is fresh. I've literally recorded it as I go around. And what's happening now with the team is more often I'll go do the initial site visits, meet the clients, take the brief, and whilst I'm in the garden, say, do the videos. Then they have actually as much information as possible. It's really hard to get a lot of information from a photo of a manhole cover that you took 2 weeks ago, and you can't really remember why you took this photo, but you know that it's really, really important. So doing the video and narrating as you go along just means it's there, it's fresh, it's but yeah, in terms of coming up with unexpected things, they do happen. So you just make sure everyone's flexible. That think of all the solutions around it, and make sure that the client not only knows about it, but can be part of that informed decision. Thanks, Tim. Tim says he doesn't take any photos of manhole covers. That was one example. It's often like the corner of a house I might take a picture of, some mud, a particular tree, but when you go back and I say it could be a couple of weeks to be reviewing this again, you don't remember why you took this photo. So I'm saying the live videos have been a bit of a revelation with me and the team, not necessarily manhole covers. So Natasha asked, do you have to learn ArchiCAD specifically to work in this way in a joint architectural landscape design practice, as opposed to using a more garden design specific Vectorworks? Yes, it helps massively in the short answer. Again, some bits of software do export into each other. I find that some bits of information don't transport over, or things that are groups then are undone. So it just means having to redo lots of work that's already been done. But with that said, because I was using SketchUp before that, and that did export into ArchiCAD, but the same issue came up. Some things weren't transferring over properly. So to do that, I think just making sure if you're going to receive some plans, that things that aren't necessary are maybe taken off or hidden, or maybe on separate drawings or separate layers. But I think it was a huge plus being able to work on the same software as them. It just meant, you know, we update the garden on the same physical drawing as they've drawn the house. So there's no doubling up of work, and there's no crossover. And what's great with that is, I say, on ArchiCAD specifically, is you press one button, it updates. Both house and garden are updated, and they're all on the same model. I hadn't heard of ArchiCAD prior to joining HollandGreen. And if I'm honest, I haven't mastered it yet, but there's 3 other designers that are completely up on it. And, you know, they learning a new bit of software can always be a little bit daunting, but actually once you're in it and you're using it, the benefits we're really reaping the benefits now. Like, things are all up to date, things are all joined up. You know, we're not updating 2 lots of drawings, we do it once and we do it, you know, it's clean and it's easy. So Sonia from Stoneworld was asked, how do you approach the task of specifying stone products on a project? We, Stoneworld, are obviously known to you as a stone supplier, but where do you start the process of a selection of on a collaborative project where architects and garden designers are working on together from the onset? Do you use Reba platform for specifying stone? How relevant is that as a platform for landscape projects, do you think? So again, it kind of goes back to early communication. Stone's probably, with the design process, with stone, selecting the stone is something that happens a little bit later in the design stages. What I suppose we'd like to do first is make sure we've got the sort of the massing right, the right shapes, the right sizes, the right positions for things before we start going into too much detail about specific stones. But when we do get there, you know, when we're kind of into developed design or detailed design and we are picking stone, again, it goes, because we're in such a collaborative group, we try, and it's kind of one of the selling points of HollandGreen is that these, you know, the 3 disciplines are together. You know, we will have mini design meetings, mini workshops, and we will speak about, you know, what things are happening inside, what things are happening, you know, for cladding on walls, and what things can we match outside as well. So again, the whole thing is about making sure that it's, you know, everything's joined, that there's a specific design language that flows from inside the house to the exterior of the house and out in the garden. You know, it will start off by, you know, looking at just some photos, general styles, you know, is it ribbon, is it sawn that the clients like, is it large format, is it small format? Once you start narrowing those ideas down, then you'd have a selection of maybe 3 or 4 different types of stone. They, you know, depends on the project. Sometimes they're contrasting, sometimes because that's the look that you're going for. Sometimes they're very similar, but definitely having a sample in your hand. The small samples are great for carrying around, but 9 times out of 10 we're asked if you can have a larger sample, because it's quite hard to make what is quite an expensive decision on a tiny piece of stone. So wherever we can, we'd ask the previous clients or places like Stoneworld, who we've worked with on a large project the beginning of this year. In that respect, the client went to Stoneworld to have a look at some pre-laid examples. I went as well, just to confirm. We had to go separately for timings. Ideally, you'd go together, have a look at the options, see it laid, I think is really important. Again, it's hard to make such an informed decision on a tiny piece of stone, which does cost a lot of money. And actually, one of the tricks is, you know, look at it outside as well as inside. If you're inside and having a meeting, hopefully not these days because of restrictions, but the light is very different inside. So I'd always suggest take it outside if you can, if you're lucky enough to have a nice supplier like Stoneworld. Get a larger sample or a couple of pieces of stone, lay them out on site in location, just to make sure the light is right, the positioning is right, and then go from there. You asked about do I use Reba platform for specifying stone. How relevant is this for a platform for landscape projects? I haven't actually, in all honesty, but I'm sure the architects have. Again, that's kind of led with 9 times out of 10, a project will be led by the architecture in terms of the materials and the styling. So we take that information, we learn from that, and then adapt our designs to make sure that it matches with the same style that the client like. You know, when you go and see a client, you take all the information, tiny little things. What's the kitchen look like? How many kids they have? How messy the house is? Where are they using certain areas of the house? All these little bits of information. You start building a picture about you know, their lifestyle and how they'd like to use the garden. And then you kind of adapt your designs to make sure it fits around all these little bits of information that you've picked up. So Camilla asked, do you usually do presentations using views and plans or include a video animation for the whole design? All of them, really. I suppose in terms of the process, what we usually do and what we're using, we've now got fancy laptops, which present books and have an interactive pen. And what comes with this is a software called Whiteboard. In fact, it's part of Zoom. Now we're using this a lot more now, where we're basically doing some really rough outline sketches, sticking on some, you know, it can be quite rough and ready, but sticking on some mood board images. It's just, you know, a kind of rough and very initial mood board to present to clients. So what we do is before we spend lots of time going down a route that they may or may not like, we tend to have, after a few days of them signing up, is to have an initial discussion with Whiteboard. Again, this is really sketchy. It's really, really early doors, but it's to make sure that they've got a little bit, that we hear their initial feedback and to make sure to steer us in the right direction. So one example that can often happen is, you know, maybe with a couple, one wants it more contemporary, one would like it more traditional. It's easy for you to go down one route as opposed to the other. And then you've kind of disappointed one person. So the idea is, with this very early initial meeting, you know, before you start getting into 3D CAD stuff, it's just early sketches in plan. No detail really. It's just about massing, making sure you've got the areas kind of correct that work with the house, and then some mood board images. Make sure, you know, you've got, you know, the design intent is there. Once you've got through that stage, so that tends to be sort of feasibility and concept stage. In develop design, we'll then build the house and garden, and then that's kind of when the 3D element comes in. So ArchiCAD is basically AutoCAD and SketchUp mixed together. It does all the technical stuff that AutoCAD can do, and you can do 3D views that SketchUp can do. And I've used both, so this is pretty much a mix between the two. So it's great. So again, at some previous places, I was doing detailed stuff on AutoCAD and then more 3D visuals as hand drawing or in SketchUp. But it meant, you know, drawing the thing twice, or having to draw some areas twice, which again takes up a lot of time. And again, in ArchiCAD, it's all under one roof. It's all there. It's all quick and it's all very easy. So once we've passed develop design, we then get into the 3D element. Doing renders can take a lot of time, so we normally sell it as an individual package. If you want sort of 3D realistic renders, photorealistic renders, there might be a separate thing, and then that will probably be later in the design. So yeah, early door sort of sketchy stuff in plan, then probably developing that and then rolling into 3D, and then once we're almost at a fixed design, that's when we'd like to do sort of 3D, the photorealistic renders. It depends on the client ultimately as well, because some, and including me, I design in 3D. I much prefer to see it in 3D, just to make this, you know, with gardens with levels, you kind of need that element to see it at all different angles to make sure it works. A lot of clients are the same. But yeah, as a general rule, we start with very early sketches in plan, then develop that into sort of more formal ideas. Then go and then develop that again after a second presentation meeting, and then we'll get into 3D renders. Once you've got the 3D sort of CAD up, so not necessarily photorealistic renders, but the 3D, the raw sort of drawing. Again, it might be that some things might need to change from there, and that might be another time that you present to the client just to make sure you've ticked all the boxes and everything works within the brief that you've got. So one of the next questions was about ArchiCAD and doing planting plans. So can you do planting plans as you can in Vectorworks with quantities, schedules, etc.? Not necessarily. So we have to, when we're kind of building libraries at the moment where we're inputting the information, and then that's saved onto our system. So again, ArchiCAD is more set up for architects. So again, it's quite techy, but and one of the things is, so SketchUp is great if for the 3D stuff because it has a huge library of plants, as does Vectorworks as well. ArchiCAD has less, so you can buy individual packages, but we tend to, we're starting to build libraries to make sure we're not doing stuff over and over again. But we haven't got to the point where we've sussed out the best way for that just yet. So in essence, we're kind of inputting the information ourselves and then saving it to make sure we've got libraries for the next project. We have a set of plants kind of ready to go. Clearly, we don't want the same planting plan each and every time, so it's constantly updated. So yes, Tanya's just asking about LangCAD. I have heard of LangCAD. I haven't used it yet, but that is definitely something to explore. Because yeah, it's can be quite time-consuming inputting information from scratch. So that's actually something that we will look into. Thank you for the tip.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very helpful tip. Yeah, sorry, I had to shoot out. Somebody calling me in. So have we covered the most of the questions? Any other ones there we need to sort of cover off any input from the architectural side, or?
I think we've covered I've gone through the lists on the video. And here it's just Tim taking the mic.
Good. But yeah, so questions coming through. Anyone else has got any, please do put them through before we sign off.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, Tim. You're welcome. I don't think we've actually properly met yet. This is the closest we got. But I said we'll catch up at a show garden at some point. I think, should we conclude it there?
Yeah, I think that probably seems sensible. I think thank you everyone for the questions and the input. It's been really helpful. Oh, again, some last minute questions.
Oh, yeah. Flood.
How much more effective are CGI perspectives than sketchy ones in your experience?
I think that depends on the client. I think sketchy ones are good. They're kind of soft focus, so not all the details are I can completely sort out yet. I think I'd do CGIs probably when everything is thought out. You know, they're probably a lot of the detailing. You're 99% there with the detailing. Again, because they do take quite a long time to get up and running. If you're getting externally, it can be quite expensive. So if I'm going to do sort of a photo realistic CGI, I might prefer that all the details are kind of thought out. And again, the great thing about the sketchy sort of images is it's a little bit looser, it's a little bit more dreamy. So not not everything needs to be completely detailed, and actually that can be quite useful, quite a useful tool, because some clients, if they see a CGI, it's quite fixed, it feels can't be changed very easily, and in a sketchy drawing, actually it's quite softer in the eye.
CGIs are quite final. I think, yeah, it tends to be, certainly from the architectural point of view as well. We use the sketchy images initially to convey idea, because you can get them out quick and easily to convey ideas and keep it moving and evolving. And then once we know we've landed it, but we still got 18 months until construction finishes and everything's there, and you get to see the finished article, the CGI quality finish at that point is really helpful for giving us that final view of the finished design before making a final commitment to sort of colours or finishes or final sort of products and so forth. But it's too much work and too labour intensive to use too early on in the process, and would cost us a lot of hours, the clients a lot of money, and doesn't allow for that quick evolution of ideas and collaboration at the front end of the project. So sketches start off with, and the CGIs at the end to finalise things. And yeah, you know, we've had some big decisions made based on the CGIs, which would have been hugely expensive if we'd have waited to see the finished project built out and then decided, actually, I don't like that stone, we should probably take it all out and start again. You know, in fact, if you show that in the CGI, once we've landed it all, they can go, yeah, I love everything, but actually, we had this recently, the timber we had on the ceiling, we're not sure we like that, so let's change that to something else. We changed to a complete different type of timber and a timber finish, which would have been hugely expensive to have got it all in, put it all up, the client seen it, didn't like it, rip it all down, and then buy again and start again. So the CGI is great for the final confirmation, but at the earlier stages, definitely go sketchy, I would say.
What he said. Cool. Julia, I think we'll make this the last question, which is about how do we access the recording. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll make sure that that Gabby sends a link or some information to everyone to get that. So we'll watch this space. We'll figure it out and send it over to you. Okay. We'll leave it there. Well, thank you very much, guys. It was great speaking at FutureScape. It was great speaking to everyone, and thank you for the questions as well. I think there were some great questions, so we hope you found this useful. And we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye then.